There comes a moment in life when the mirror doesn't just reflect age, it reflects essence. After the age of 60, a quiet revolution begins within the soul. Society may not always see it, but something profound happens when the hair turns gray, when the body slows down, and when time becomes the most valuable currency. Cicero, the Roman philosopher, wrote that old age is not a burden, but a harvest, a season where wisdom, dignity, and legacy rise to the surface like gold from the depths. And yet, how often do we feel ignored, discarded, treated as if our value lies behind us, not ahead? But let's be clear. If you are over 60, you are more useful than the young, not because of speed, strength, or trendiness, but because you carry the one thing that youth does not have: perspective. You've seen wars and peace. You've held your children while they slept. You've made decisions that shaped generations. You've been through crises that built resilience. And now, in the eyes of Cicero, and in the truth of life itself, you are entering the most powerful phase of existence. The phase where your very presence is a lighthouse in a world that often forgets how to navigate. What makes you useful is not that you know everything. It's that you know what matters. While the young chase novelty, you know how to appreciate depth. While they fear missing out, you understand the power of silence, the comfort of a routine, and the courage it takes to say no. Cicero taught that one of the greatest virtues of old age is moderation, not the absence of passion, but the refinement of it. Your usefulness comes not from being needed, but from knowing how not to depend. And that, in a society so addicted to validation, is revolutionary. Let us also talk about emotional strength. If you've lived more than 6 decades, you've likely buried friends, endured betrayals, healed from disappointments, and perhaps even survived your own children drifting away. The pain is real, but so is your strength. Cicero believed that the soul matures as the body ages, and that maturity brings clarity. You've stopped chasing illusions, not because you're bitter, but because you've outgrown the need to prove anything to anyone. You now live for what's real, for the quiet cup of coffee, for the sound of laughter, for a peaceful night without drama. Too often, we hear that the old must stay out of the way, that their time is over. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if your time has just begun? Not in the physical race of youth, but in the soulful task of guiding, witnessing, and remembering. Cicero never feared aging. He feared irrelevance. But he also knew that irrelevance is not a state given by others. It is something we accept or reject. You are not irrelevant unless you agree to disappear. And you who have weathered life's storms deserve to be seen, not just as a grandparent, a retiree, or a memory, but as a living, breathing force of history. You are more useful than the young because you are the archive of everything they haven't lived. Your advice may be ignored at times, but that doesn't make it useless. Wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you keep whispering long enough, someone will listen. And when they do, it might save them from a mistake they weren't ready to see. So today, reclaim your seat at the table, not by demanding it, but by knowing that you've earned it. Be the calm in the room. Be the storyteller. Be the one who's been through it and came out whole. You don't need to compete with the young. They're on their way. You've already arrived. And from where you sit, the view is clearer than ever. There is something magical about perspective. It cannot be bought, taught quickly, or uploaded. It is carved with time, like a sculpture formed by years of joys and disappointments, hopes and betrayals. And if you're over 60, you hold a kind of perspective that no textbook, no university, no trendy podcast can offer. It's the perspective that sees the long game. While many younger people are experts in reacting, you've become an expert in reflecting. While others rush to conclusions, you've learned the wisdom of waiting, of letting the storm pass before deciding whether to sail or stay. Cicero saw aging as a sharpening of the soul, not a dulling of the mind. He believed that the clarity that comes with age was a gift the young simply couldn't understand yet. And isn't it true? How many times have you warned someone of a pitfall they couldn't see, only to watch them walk into it anyway? How many times have you stayed quiet, not out of apathy, but because you knew that your silence spoke louder than any lecture. That is the power of perspective, knowing when to act and when not to. This is not about claiming superiority. It's about claiming space. Your voice may not be loud, but it carries weight. Your silence is not emptiness. It is filled with meaning. When you speak, your words have roots. The young speak of ideas. You speak of experience. They argue about what might happen. You remember what has already happened. That is not weakness, it's strength. And it is a strength the world desperately needs, even if it doesn't always admit it. But perspective also brings pain. It shows you how much has changed. It shows you who is no longer here. It makes you realize how the world has sped up, often leaving behind those who move with more care, more intention. There are days when you might feel invisible, when your suggestions are dismissed as outdated, your memories brushed off as nostalgia. But Cicero would remind you, the value of memory is not in its novelty, but in its ability to anchor the present. The past is not a burden, it is a compass. Do not underestimate what your calm presence can do in a world that runs on anxiety. You, who have lived without smartphones, who navigated life without GPS, who survived without likes and shares, you have something that many now are desperately searching for: inner steadiness. You have seen what lasts and what fades. You've buried egos, lost arguments, and found peace in things that no longer need defending. That too is perspective. And here's the most beautiful part. This perspective doesn't just benefit you, it saves others. It teaches your children what patience looks like. It shows your grandchildren that dignity does not age. It reminds everyone around you that aging is not a decline, but a deepening. You are not disappearing. You are becoming more defined. So, take pride in the slow pace of your wisdom. When you walk slower, you notice more. When you pause before speaking, your words strike deeper. When you listen instead of interrupting, you hear things others miss. You are not less, you are more. More real, more grounded, more needed. You may not be able to lift as much, run as far, or stay up as late, but you can see further. And in a world so blinded by the present, that is a superpower. Cicero would smile at that truth, because he knew that in old age, we no longer chase time. We walk with it. And that's when we finally realize, the view from here is not only clearer, it's sacred. There comes a stage in life where presence becomes quieter, but no less powerful. You may notice the world no longer asks for your opinion as often. Conversations move fast, invitations get fewer. You speak, and sometimes nobody really listens. And in that silence, it's easy to feel invisible. But invisible does not mean useless. It never did. And if you're over 60, you must never confuse the noise of attention with the depth of impact. Cicero once said that old age is like a harvest. But before you harvest, there's a season of waiting, of quiet. And what feels like irrelevance may actually be the time when your roots are growing deeper than ever. The tree makes no sound when it matures, but its shadow stretches further each year. That is you now. Your silence, your stories, your watchful gaze. They hold a space that younger people don't even realize they need yet. And yet, the pain is real. There is a particular sting in being interrupted by your own children, a quiet ache when the phone stays silent, a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being around people who no longer truly see you. Cicero would not deny this pain, but he would not let you stay in it either. He would remind you that life is not a transaction. The love you gave, the sacrifices you made, were not investments with guaranteed returns. They were gifts. Pure, generous, and that is what gives them their power, not the response they get, but the soul they came from. You may wonder, if I've given everything, why do I now receive so little? The answer is painful, but freeing. Because you were never meant to live waiting for applause. Your children do love you, just not always in the way you imagined. Life has its own rhythm, and sometimes, the ones you raised don't yet realize how much they still need your light until the day it's not there. So what do you do with this invisible weight? You carry it with dignity. You let it shape your wisdom, not your bitterness. You begin to love without expectation, to give without condition, to remember without regret. And in doing so, you become untouchable. Not cold, just free. Freedom. In old age is not about escaping responsibility. It's about reclaiming your essence. You do not have to be what others expect. You do not have to explain yourself constantly. You've lived enough to know that being misunderstood is not a threat to your truth. You are not a guest in your own life. You are the author. And if people have forgotten what you mean to them, then maybe it's time you remember what you mean to yourself. You can live a life of purpose even in silence. You can mentor through example. You can teach patience by embodying it. You can restore your joy without needing permission. Cicero believed that in old age, the mind, freed from ambition, finds its highest peace. And that peace is not given. It is chosen. Yes, the world may turn its gaze to younger faces, but only your face holds the full story. And that story is not over. You still have pages to write, if not for others, then for yourself. Write them with beauty, with self-respect, with the kind of truth that comes only when you no longer need to prove anything, because usefulness is not measured by activity, it is measured by impact. And if you are still breathing, you are still influencing the world. Quietly, steadily, powerfully. One of the hardest truths to accept is this: you were once everything to someone, and now you are just background. The children you fed, bathed, guided, and comforted now live lives where you're not always included. Not because they don't care, but because life has moved forward. The schedules are packed, the calls are short. The love is there, but hidden behind fatigue, bills, distractions. And suddenly, the house you once filled with life becomes quieter than you ever imagined. This transition is brutal if you are not prepared for it. The biggest challenge of aging is not physical, it is emotional. It is shifting from being needed all the time to realizing you are no longer the center. And in that silence you begin to question, what is my role now? Where do I fit in a world that seems to have outgrown me? Cicero understood this pain centuries ago. He wrote that as we grow older, we must change the nature of our love. It must evolve from giving to being, from serving to observing, from doing for others to finally being enough for ourselves. It is the shift from utility to presence, and it is not a downgrade, it is an upgrade in depth. This does not mean you are useless, it means your usefulness has changed form. You no longer prove your value by what you do for others, but by the way you exist with grace, with steadiness, with a quiet dignity that no longer chases validation. You begin to live, not to be seen, but to see, not to be heard, but to understand. And slowly, a new kind of peace takes root. You realize you don't have to compete with youth. You don't have to chase relevance. You are relevance. You are the reminder that life is not about how much we do, but about how we carry what we've already done, and you've carried a lot. You've held families together. You've made sacrifices that no one will ever fully grasp. And now, you are allowed, yes, allowed, to turn some of that love back toward yourself. You are not selfish for wanting your own space. You are not cold for drawing boundaries. You are not wrong for saying, I need time for me. For decades, your life orbited around others. Now it is your soul that deserves attention. This is not abandonment, it is self-respect. And it is one of the most important lessons you can teach, that love includes the self, not just the other. Your children may not understand this right away. They might resist. They might even accuse you of being distant. But eventually, they will see. They will see that you are not walking away. You are walking inward. They will see that their strong, steady parent is not disappearing, but transforming. And here's the miracle. When you stop needing to be needed, your love becomes even more powerful. It is no longer tangled with expectation. It is no longer heavy. It becomes light, clear, peaceful. And people begin to gravitate to you again, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect and admiration. Cicero said that aging gracefully means knowing when to step back, Not because you're weak, but because your strength is no longer measured by control. It is measured by calm, by the ability to stand still in a world that never stops moving. You are no longer at the center of the action, and that is your greatest strength, because you are now the center of something deeper: stillness, reflection, legacy. So the next time you feel no longer needed, remember, you are, just not in the same way. You are needed as a lighthouse, not a motor; as a presence, not a force; as a wisdom keeper, not a worker. Your usefulness is not past, it is peaking. And the world needs it more than ever, even if it doesn't know how to ask. There is a sacred power in having your own space. Not just a room, not just a house, but a space where your rhythm is honored, your silence respected, your presence felt without needing explanation. For decades, you may have lived for others, for your children, your spouse, your career. But now, at this stage in life, there is a quiet dignity in reclaiming a space that reflects who you truly are. Cicero taught that old age is the reward for a life well lived, and that reward includes the right to peace. Peace from constant demands, peace from unspoken expectations, peace from the noise of trying to prove your worth. And that peace is often found in solitude, not in loneliness, but in chosen solitude, where you are finally allowed to breathe without pressure. This is not about abandoning your loved ones. It's about returning to yourself. It's about realizing that having space isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's about understanding that you can love your children deeply and still need a home that doesn't revolve around their schedules. You can adore your grandchildren and still need mornings without noise, afternoons with your books, evenings with your memories. Cicero would tell you that this is the time to turn inward, not to hide, but to harvest. Because everything you've lived, every lesson, every scar, every joy has made you who you are. And now you get to arrange those pieces in the way that feels right to you. In your space, you choose the music, you choose the pace, you choose when to talk and when to sit in sacred silence. And that is power. There is beauty in your plants, in your books, in your chair by the window. These are not signs of isolation. They are signs of presence, your presence. You have nothing to prove. You've done the work. You've built the foundations. And now, like a seasoned artist stepping back from the canvas, you get to admire the life you've created, not through busyness, but through presence. If others see your solitude and misinterpret it as sadness, let them. If they question why, you've chosen your own apartment, your own routine, your own pace, let them wonder. Because you know something they don't yet understand, that peace is not found in being surrounded, it is found in being centered. And what happens when you live like this? People begin to approach you differently. Not as someone who needs care, but as someone who offers calm. They sit next to you, not because you demanded it, but because your presence feels safe. You become the grounding force in a chaotic world. You become the memory keeper, the storyteller, the one who understands that silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. This space of yours, however small, is not just a physical place. It is emotional. It is spiritual. It is your soul's echo. And it matters. It is the sanctuary where you can cry if you need to, laugh when no one's watching, dance to music that only you remember. It is where you can speak to yourself out loud and not feel crazy. It is where you are not a parent, a grandparent, a helper. You are simply you. So honor this space. Let it be a reminder that your value is not dependent on how often people visit or how many calls you receive. Your value is in how fully you occupy your life, and that fullness doesn't require noise. It requires presence. Cicero believed that dignity is not about how others treat us, but how we treat ourselves. And in this space you've created, this world that is yours alone, you treat yourself with the love, the attention, and the grace you have always deserved. Aging is not a curtain closing, it is a new light on the same stage. But the world often tries to convince us otherwise. It whispers that your time has passed, that you've had your turn, that now you must step aside. And slowly, if you're not careful, you start to believe it. You shrink. You apologize. You fade. But Cicero would rise from his grave to remind you, you were never meant to disappear. You are not the echo of the past. You are the wisdom of the present. You are not less because you are older. You are more. Because now, every smile carries the weight of survival. Every wrinkle is proof that you've felt deeply. Every scar is a badge of love, loss, and healing. While the world celebrates youth's beginning, it forgets that there is something even more beautiful: completion. And you, in your 60s and beyond, are completing something powerful. A life of value, of giving, of learning. You are the result of endurance, not just existence. There's a grace in not chasing anymore, in not needing to prove your worth in every room you walk into. There's freedom in sitting at the edge of a family gathering and knowing that your silence holds more presence than 100 conversations. You are not invisible. You are foundational. You are the one whose stories shape the rules, whose sacrifices made the path easier for others. And even if they never say it, even if they never understand it, you were essential. Cicero believed that the final stage of life was not decline, but dignity. It was the time to enjoy the fruits of a life well tended, to walk slower, not out of weakness, but to notice the things that rushed past before, to speak less, not because you lack ideas, but because you now value peace over proving, to feel deeply, because time has made you more human, not less. Do not wait for recognition to validate your journey. Walk with the knowledge that you were necessary, that even now when the world looks elsewhere, you are more relevant than ever. Because you've lived long enough to understand that truth does not shout, it whispers. And you, wise one, have earned the right to whisper with strength. Maybe your children are too busy to notice your pain. Maybe your calls go unanswered. Maybe society looks past you. But you are not defined by their forgetfulness. You are defined by your depth, by the kindness you continue to offer, by the forgiveness you've given freely, by the dreams you still carry quietly in your heart. Let this be your time, not a time of retreat but of revelation. Let yourself write again, paint again, walk again, love again. Let yourself be seen, not for who you used to be, but for who you still are. And if the world won't look at yourself and smile, because what you see is someone who never gave up, someone who still matters, someone who is still becoming. You are not done. You are not irrelevant. You are not fading. You are more useful now than ever, not in the doing, but in the being. Not in the noise, but in the wisdom. Not in the crowd, but in your calm. And if you ever forget that, let this be your reminder. You were never meant to disappear. You were meant to shine, quietly, steadily, beautifully, until the very end.